Hello and a very warm welcome from Barcelona for round 4 of the FIA World Championship. This is Ben Edwards and John Watson looking forward to the first hour of qualifying, and thankfully the track is dry and the sun is just beginning to poke its way through. Horrendous weather conditions here yesterday and still a forecast of showers, which meant the morning session was a bit tricky. But John, I think we're looking forward to a great session here.
Well, Ben, we had a session, as we saw, wet going to dry, and of course that always produces a fair amount of excitement. But since that hour-and-a-half session some hour and a half ago, we have now got a dry track, almost ideal conditions, and I really look forward to seeing a session which undoubtedly is going to provide excitement. Michael Schumacher, at the end of that 1.5 hours this morning, ended up being quickest by quite a big gap, 1.1 seconds from Gerhard Berger and Jean Alesi, with Mika Hakkinen 4th, Damon Hill 5th, Eddie Irvine 6th. Now, the reason why we saw Michael Schumacher ending 1.1 seconds quicker was because he was on the track at the right part of the session and he had laps remaining. But nonetheless, it's a reaffirmation of what Benetton told me after San Marino Grand Prix 2 weekends ago. They were stung by the fact that Williams really blew them away, and Michael Schumacher also really had that nasty, nasty accident. They knew that they were going to be competitive here, and so far what we have seen is Schumacher looks very strong indeed.
Well, the circuit looking in much, much better shape than it did when they went out for the first free practice session this morning. Interestingly, Jean Alesi was massively quicker during the first part of that free practice session, almost 9 seconds faster than anybody else.
Well, what Alesi did was very early in that session, in the first part, remember, mornings are 2-part sessions, he went out on a set of slick tyres while everybody else was out on wets. The track really wasn't wet enough to be in wets. In fact, it was very slippery, very scummy. But Alesi put on a set of slicks and suddenly the times just dropped away. We expected everybody to follow suit. But in fact, the strategy that teams began to look at was, well, hold on a second, we're not going to gain anything really by running on slick tyres on a very slick and greasy circuit. We want to keep back as many tyres as we can, primarily for Sunday's Grand Prix. But also through the weekend, they want to have as many fresh sets of tyres available, particularly in the qualifying sessions, and we're just now into that first qualifying session, and once again Verstappen, the first car out onto the circuit.
Well, Jos Verstappen does seem to be the man most eager to get out on the track, and we saw it again this morning in the free practice session. He was one of the first out on the circuit, and once again here he is. We saw the same in the last race at Imola, in fact. Interesting to note that he set a good time this morning. Once again, he was 12th fastest during that free practice session. An excellent performance for the Simtech team, and well, it's giving them a lot of hope and a lot of confidence for a good qualifying result here today. Well, Michael Schumacher did have a spin this morning, so it wasn't all perfect. Although he set the fastest time, he had a little off. It wasn't anything major, and in fact he didn't stall the engine, managed to keep it going and restart. And in fact, Johnny Herbert also had an off this morning, which denied him very many laps, stuck it in the gravel.
Yes, and really it came at the worst part of that morning session. Johnny went out in part 2, and within, I think, 4 laps he ended up in the gravel bed, and the car had to remain there until the end of that session, and lots of valuable track time. And with the limited number of laps that is permitted, first of all in that 1.5 hour session, and only 12 laps in these qualifying sessions, any time lost in any session is a big handicap.
So the young Dutchman, who once again had an excellent start to the race in the last race at Imola, got himself up to 8th place in the early stages, but unfortunately went out with problems. They've been suffering quite a few gearbox glitches with the Simtech over the last few races. They're hoping that they've managed to sort out the software for the system and that they're not going to see a repeat of those problems, because it has been denying them a good result. But Verstappen's starts and early laps in the last few races really have been very dramatic, and well, he'll be looking for more of the same on this weekend. Well, the Ferraris were looking very strong this morning as well, so we're going to be certainly looking forward to seeing both Gerhard Berger and Jean Alesi out on the circuit a little bit later. I think they could be in for a good result here.
One of the things that has been talked about in the pit lane, and Ferrari's performance is one of the main areas, is why are Ferrari so competitive? Now, the majority of races, the 3 that have been held this year, have by and large been held in conditions which have not been necessarily as warm as one would have expected in the venue. And the belief is that Ferrari are able to use their tyres more effectively, particularly in cold sessions, than we're seeing in very, very hot conditions. So let's look at Ferrari this afternoon and watch what they're going to do, because right now the temperature, while it's rising, is not what we'd expect at this time of year in Spain.
Session from Barcelona is now some 7 minutes or 6 minutes old, and Mika Hakkinen is the man we're watching. He's fastest at the moment on a 1:25.914, but we've only seen 4 cars on the circuit.
And Ben, more significantly, is Mika Hakkinen, who was in fact 4th quickest this morning, has improved by some 0.2 of a second. The Hakkinen on his 4th lap, looking for further improvements. Looking all the way back to last year's Grand Prix on a circuit that was different to what we're now using for 1995. Pole position was set by Michael Schumacher, 1:21.908. Now that's the benchmark that the teams this year are looking towards. The main change is in fact between Campsa corner and La Chiaxa. Last year we had the Nissan chicane, a tyre chicane that was a temporary setup. That has now disappeared. It is a straight run from Campsa down to La Chiaxa. That part of the circuit much quicker, but of course the changes, the technical regulations to engines and to aerodynamics, that's countered some of that speed gain. But I would expect to see times drop all the way down to, well, Michael Schumacher, 1:24.083, that was his time this morning. I would expect to see times below that by the time this 1 hour session finishes.
We're looking now at Gianni Morbidelli, the Italian. He's 4th fastest at the moment, but he's only really just beginning his first fastest lap. Not quite as promising this morning as normal, but probably wasn't out at exactly the right time. He found himself down in 18th fastest position after that free practice session. Well, Morbidelli finished 13th at San Marino last time out. Qualified 11th. He's had some good qualifying performances, always just outside the top 10 so far this year, and that's certainly very promising for the team.
Well, really, it comes back to one thing, and that's budget. And any team that is short of budget really has to cut their cloth to suit the amount of budget they have. And Mika Hakkinen's car being pushed into the scrutineering bay to have that car checked. And he'll then be pushed back into the garage. Mika Hakkinen, currently quickest, completed 4 laps, 1:25.914. And that's some 1.8 seconds slower than we saw from Schumacher at the end of this session this morning. Of course, still only 4 cars on the track. The big guns, Benetton, Williams and Ferrari, waiting and watching and trying to learn a little bit from what they've seen from, in fact, we're now joined by Heinz-Harald Frentzen in the first of the 2 Saubers. And Frentzen, he was 7th quickest this morning. Teammate Karl Wendlinger spent a long time in the garage. He had lots of problems. He got out, completed 11 laps, but all the way down in 19th place.
Certainly a big improvement in form for Heinz-Harald Frentzen. They found some time at Imola in testing, and quite a few of the major teams did a 4-day test after the Grand Prix at Imola, and it was a test at which Ferrari came away pretty happy because Gerhard Berger was the fastest. It was only by a fraction of a second from Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill. But of course, testing is one thing, qualifying is quite another, and the battle today is very likely still to be between Ferrari, Williams and Benetton for that pole position.
And that battle for pole position is going to be the highlight of this afternoon's qualification, and 24 hours on Saturday, it's going to be the same. But Gianni Morbidelli, he's got one of the biggest hearts of any racing driver in Grand Prix racing. And he's a man, I'm sure, that in the future, a lot of teams, and some of the bigger teams, the more well-financed teams, must be very impressed by what he's done with the equipment. Brian Hart's V8 engine, of course, powering the footwork chassis. But Morbidelli always happy, always positive, something not always the case with 4 leading lights in Formula One.
Well, Footwork did a little bit of testing themselves in the gap between Imola and Spain, and that was done at Silverstone. And in fact, they've also announced that their official test and reserve driver now is Max Papis, a man who managed to get a bit more running in at Silverstone, get a bit more experience of the car, and thoroughly enjoyed his first proper test. He had driven the car one previous occasion, but hadn't managed to complete many laps. And Max Papis won the Formula 3000 race here last year, and is now the official test driver. Now there is Karl Wendlinger in the much improved Sauber. They've improved the underbody aerodynamics. They've put a new floor section on the car and seem to have found quite a lot of time.
But the funny thing is with that test, they put all these parts onto the wind tunnel model. They had the bits prior to Imola, but the wind tunnel model test didn't indicate such a big difference as they found when they went to Imola and did the real test, the practical test. So we're taking a short commercial break. Remain with us. We'll be back in a moment.
Welcome back to Barcelona for this first qualifying session for the Spanish Grand Prix, live here on Eurosport. And there is Nigel Mansell in the McLaren Mercedes.
Well, Nigel had a pretty mixed session this morning, and he wasn't particularly happy with the car setup. He went a different way to Mika Hakkinen, and in fact he had a car that was understeering turning in and oversteering on the edges of corners. Not a very nice way to drive a car at all. And Nigel Mansell ended up all the way down in 14th place. His time was 1 minute 29.162. So Mansell, first out lap complete now, beginning his first flying lap. And we hope to see some improvement because, and Mansell, you can see the back of the car does not look comfortable. It's really, really fidgety. And whatever the change in setup from this morning to this qualifying session, maybe it'll stabilize because, you know, the first lap out, again, look at the back of the car. Well, there's the first segment time you can see on screen. That's all the way down at the cars. Yeah, in the back of the car, there's that first segment time. In fact, was out of the long goal, and Mansell and also that car, that is absolutely undrivable. And I'm sure Mansell will just want to go straight back into the pits. He doesn't have to say anything. He will say, just guys, watch that monitor. I cannot drive this car at all.
So Mansell really fighting his car at the moment as he continues around 2 seconds off the pace of Mika Hakkinen on that split time, and certainly seems to be fighting the car at the moment. Interesting to report that they've got the spare car here this weekend is the bigger version. It is the C model of the MP410, so Mansell can indeed drive the spare car this weekend as well, or at the moment, in fact, it is set up for Mika Hakkinen, but it takes them only around about 15 minutes to change the car for Mansell to drive it. So 6th fastest as he crosses the line. We still have Mika Hakkinen at the head of the list, then Olivier Panis 2nd fastest, and Frentzen 3rd.
Well, Ben, in spite of all those heroics from Mansell, he actually improved on his time from the morning. And if he can get the back end of that car under control, he may well find more time. But I'm surprised. It looked just so undrivable. Now, Mansell likes a car that is very quick turning. He's got a minute steering wheel in the car, which gives him very, very rapid response on the wheel. But to have to drive a car that is so much on the knife edges, it appeared on his first flying lap, looks much better now. Maybe the balance between front and rear tyre temperatures is better. Tyre pressures also play a big part in the car's handling. Much better on the exit through that little chicane just after Worth Corner. And now this is the new part of the circuit. Exit Campsa Corner, 510 metres of straight, all the way down to La Quiaxa. 280 kilometres per hour, that's the guesstimate speed that Mansell will be attaining.
Nigel Mansell is the most successful driver on the Barcelona circuit. He's won this race twice, in 1991 and in 1992. Both occasions, of course, he was driving for Williams. And in fact, Williams have won all of the races here at Barcelona. Now let's see what this is. It's a 26.939, and Nigel Mansell goes 3rd fastest behind Hakkinen and Panis. Nigel Mansell, 3rd fastest, and that's a good effort. Oh, we see one of the Jordans off. It's Eddie Irvine off in the gravel trap at the Elf corner. And, well, let's see if we've got a replay. That, in fact, is Domenico Schiattarella spinning. So another car in trouble, but we did see Irvine off.
Yes, the problem for Irvine is he's off at a part of the circuit where he might get back on, but he may have to have outside assistance. Otherwise, it looks like the end of the session, and Irvine had just gone out, completed his out lap. That was the beginning of his first time lap, and it could all be over for him before really it even began.
And with the prospect of showers all over the weekend, the forecast is not that brilliant, then Eddie will be a worried man, I should think, after depositing the car in the gravel. We'll have to wait and see whether there's any chance of him getting out, but it doesn't look terribly likely. Mansell is cruising, I think, at the moment. I don't think he's going for another quick lap just yet. He's now completed 3 of his allocated 12 laps, but it's still his teammate, Mika Hakkinen, fastest at the moment. Olivier Panis, good effort in the Ligier, is currently 2nd fastest. then Mansell, then Heinz-Harald Frentzen, then it's Gianni Morbidelli 5th, Carl Wendlinger is 6th, and in 7th position, a man who we were told would go well here in Barcelona by a man very involved in his career, David Sears. Taki Inoue is currently 7th fastest, the Japanese driver in the second of the footworks, and he was 13th this morning, so a good effort.
And of course there's a battle going on between Footwork team, the Simtech team, those teams that are running the V8s. In the case, of course, of Verstappen, he's running the Ford ED, the customer Ford engine. And really throughout the morning session, Verstappen and Inoue were swapping places. It turned out in the morning that Verstappen was just the quicker of the two. This afternoon, currently, a tenth of a second between those two remaining.
Well, we're on board Johnny Herbert's car now, the Benetton Renault that went off this morning in the free practice session just as the track was beginning to dry out, so really he ended up 25th fastest and didn't have the benefit of any dry track running, so that's really set him back a little bit now. Of course, he's got to work harder on getting the car set up, and that's his first flying lap. So now is an opportunity to have a little look at the circuit from on board the Benetton, coming down into the Elf corner. Well, we now switch, in fact, to look at one of the Tyrrells. That's the car of Ukio Katayama.
Well, for Eddie Irvine fans, he has made it back out of that gravel bed, and we wait to see whether he will complete another lap or go back into the pit lane, because when you get into those gravel beds, it gets everywhere, and I would think that they will want to clear any residue of gravel in his car away. But in the meantime, Johnny Herbert, who really had a miserable time this morning and needed as many of those dry laps as possible, but he did benefit a lot from the testing in Imola. He got a lot of running there, and this thing of confidence, apart from anything else, the teammate of Michael Schumacher always has had a difficult time. So Johnny Herbert looking for a trouble-free session, and a session to establish himself and confirm himself as being the man, the best teammate that Schumacher has ever had.
Well, the keen-eyed amongst you Eurosport fans will have noticed there's a little change of colour on the back of that Benetton. The rear wing end plate is now orange with some backing from Flymo. So it's like change in appearance to the Benetton Renault. And, well, we just looked at the list, and Eddie Irvine, the man we saw in the gravel a moment ago, believe it or not, has just gone fastest. Eddie Irvine's done a 25.730. That's nearly 2/10 of a second faster than Mika Hakkinen.
Well, clearly there wasn't much wrong with the car, and that again a big improvement from Irvine, almost 3/4 of a second from what he put in this morning, and Irvine continuing on this first run in his first set of tyres. And this is really, Ben, what we're going to see throughout this session, because with the limited amount of running this morning on a really dry track, and this is what makes qualifying so exciting. In a way, you almost wish you could have a wet morning session to lead into an almost blind dry qualifying session between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock. And there is the view from a very strangely mounted camera on top of the rollover hoop. You can just see it as Irvine now comes into the pits, and that's the view that we're getting from the cockpit of Irvine, and you can see just how much turbulence and how much the driver is affected by the bumps around the circuit.
So there comes the fastest man currently in this first qualifying session into the pit lane. Eddie Irvine heads the list from Mika Hakkinen, Olivier Panis, Nigel Mansell 4th, and Johnny Herbert, with whom we're riding now, he's currently 5th fastest, a 1:27.004. That means he's 1.2 seconds off the man we're looking at now, Eddie Irvine. Behind Herbert, it's Frentzen 6th, Morbidelli 7th, then Taki Inoue 8th, and the man making his return to Grand Prix racing this weekend, Martin Brundle. He's now, well, he was 9th, he's just gone down to 10th fastest, but this obviously an important session for Brundle, his first qualifying session of the year.
And the man we're on screen, look, a big improvement for Johnny Herbert, 1:25.818. That's 88 hundredths of a second slower than provisional poleman Irvine. And Johnny Herbert looks very purposeful. The first time, really, he's getting to grips with the dry track, and he's paying dividends.
Well, a good qualifying performance in the first race in Brazil for Johnny Herbert when he qualified 4th, and that's just the sort of performance that he needs here this weekend in Barcelona. But there's the man we were talking about just a moment ago. It's Martin Brundle. He's taken over the number 25 Ligier from Aguri Suzuki. Suzuki did the first 3 races, but now it's Brundle's turn. They should be getting 8 races apiece throughout the course of the season, and Brundle managed to get some testing in at Imola.
Well, that Imola test really gave Martin Brundle the first opportunity to drive against other current Formula One cars. And he did come away and say, well, if the car's wrong, it's really wrong. If it's right, it's nice to drive. But for Martin Brundle and Aguri Suzuki, they are meant to have an 8-race deal apiece. But there is pressure currently from Japan to get Aguri Suzuki into the car for as much of the rest of the season as possible. So the situation, while it appears to be 8 races apiece, it may well not be so later in the season.
Johnny Herbert has further improved his time, but it's still second place for him. He's 0.03 of a second slower than Eddie Irvine. So a good battle between these two, and Irvine and Herbert, really the top names that we see out at the moment. We still haven't seen the likes of Jean Alesi out there, nor Gerhard Berger, and we haven't seen either of the two Williams out on circuit. So we've still got plenty of prospects for a good qualifying session here, but it's good to see the Jordan Peugeot heading the list at the moment. That'll certainly raise their spirits after some difficult races this year.
Well, we're looking here at Johnny Herbert, and with Irvine's time virtually identical. So far, Irvine is about 3/4 of a second gain, and he's the first of the real top 6 runners this morning to make any significant time. So if you look towards the two Ferraris, the two Williams, and Michael Schumacher, who is yet to be seen on the track, it's between 3/4 and a second improvement in conditions from what we had this morning. And there we watch now the first of the two Ferraris out onto the circuit. And in the meantime, Johnny Herbert had a fractional improvement at those segment times. We wait to see, can Herbert now get himself to the top of the top? He has 2.2 of a second. Johnny Herbert, 1:25.530, 5 laps complete. Will he go back into the pits, or is he going to continue? One of the things that is so important is to get tyre temperature, and if you can do so, the difference in handling is unbelievable. And if Herbert is feeling the benefit of tyre temperature, it relates to grip and to handling, and that therefore relates to your confidence, and that alone can contribute time to a driver.
Going through the Repsol corner, then dropping downhill into the left hand at Sayat. And in fact, there's a view here. They have a view across the circuit. They can see the end of the start-finish line. We can't quite see it on camera, but it gives them an opportunity to look across the track. It is a popular circuit with the drivers, and only very minor alterations really this year. And in many ways, this circuit is less changed than any other circuit that we've been to so far this year.
Of course, one of the big changes, or one of the changes, let's say, is on the corner onto the start-finish line, where we saw Andrea Montermini have a very large accident last year in practice, and that barrier that came back towards the area of the start-finish straight, that has been moved much further back, so a greater area in case a driver more or less does what Montermini did last year. That's run wide and not lift, and that's basically what they've done around the circuit. Of course, that section of circuit round the Nissan chicane that had a temporary tyre wall chicane in front of it last year, that's all changed. So in essence, the circuit is marginally shorter. It ought to be quicker, but with the changes, as we've mentioned, probably on balance it'll end up being about 1.5 seconds to 2 seconds slower than 1994.
Johnny Herbert heads the timesheet at the moment, but we're looking now at Gerhard Berger, the first of the Ferraris on the circuit. In fact, Jean Alesi is also on the track as well. So now we see the opportunity for the Ferraris, who've taken 4 wins in the Spanish Grand Prix at its various different venues over the years. And of course, before Berger's win at Hockenheim last year, Ferrari's last win was in a Spanish Grand Prix when Prost won in 1990. The prospects here for a victory in Spain, well, they're certainly fairly high, I think.
And we watch Berger just go across start-finish line. I can tell you that Damon Hill has also just left the pit lane for his first run. And it is Jean Alesi, in fact, who's gone quickest, 1:23.123. And already that is a second faster than Schumacher did at the end of that session. And Schumacher himself was over a second quicker than Gerhard Berger. So times dropping like the proverbial pound.
Well, that time that Jean Alesi's done is 2.4 seconds faster than Johnny Herbert's previous best. It just gives you some idea of how quickly Alesi into the groove and attacking, and he knows he's done a good lap because he's backed off already. And well, that really is quite a lap from Jean Alesi. We can see the Williams are out there now as well, and Alesi has only done 2 laps to do that time. That really shows Ferrari are very strong indeed.
Well, we know how good the Ferrari chassis is, and we know how well they're using the Goodyear tyres here in Barcelona. It's still a power circuit, but handling really is the biggest criteria, and Ferrari chassis this year really, really working well. And Alesi still looking for that elusive first Grand Prix win. Well, he'll be going on this slow lap, feeling, well, it's going to come someday. I don't mind where it is, but he'll be delighted with this time.
Well, I had a quick wander down to the first corner during the free practice session this morning, and I have to say that both Ferraris were able to carry so much speed into the corner. The car looks very stable on braking, but they just go in that much quicker, and the car looks so drivable. They can get back on the power faster than virtually anybody as well, and the car really does look well dialed in. Gerhard Berger, by the way, has now gone second fastest, so that gives you some idea that the Ferraris are looking good here. Berger at 24.329, 1.2 seconds slower than Alesi, and there is Damon Hill. Now, what can he do to match the challenge of Ferrari? Williams know they've got a hard time here this weekend, and they know that not only Ferrari but Benetton are going to be challenging for that pole position.
Well, Damon Hill very confident after his 2 victories so far this season, and looking forward to the challenge, not just from Michael Schumacher, his principal protagonist in this year's championship, but knowing that the 2 Ferraris are very, very competitive indeed. Teammate David Coulthard also coming back to the first Grand Prix circuit in his Grand Prix career, and the value of that really is something that it's hard to comprehend, because with the limited amount of lapping you have in practice and in qualifying, first time to every circuit is really a learning process. Coming back 1 year on has got to be payback time, and Coulthard is looking for some of that investment to be paid back here this weekend.
On board with David Hill now as he begins to chase after that time of Jean Alesi. Incredibly rapid time, and here comes Hill about to cross the start-finish line. Well, he's not going to do it this time. He goes third fastest, as you can see, at 24.470. That's 1.3 seconds slower than Jean Alesi, and it looks as though he's going on to another quick lap.
Indeed, but look, you can see Damon as he comes into that very tight chicane at the end of the straight. The car, he doesn't seem to have the bite that we saw momentarily from Alesi and from the Ferrari chassis. And again, going back to this issue about tyre pressures and tyre temperature, they are so critical. Now, getting them right is very, very difficult, but again, if you've got a car which is mechanically producing a higher, or the tyre operating in its optimum operating band, you're going to find grip, you're going to find stability, and you're going to get on the throttle earlier. And it's as simple as that. For Damon Hill and for Michael Schumacher, in the case we saw earlier, Johnny Herbert, Herbert completed 5 flying laps before he got that particular time, which put him momentarily on provisional pole.
Well, Hill is certainly trying hard. We saw him run a little wide of one of the apexes. You saw him get a bit twitched up during the braking for there, and indeed he's slowed down now considerably. He's obviously not expecting to see any improvement on this lap. And, well, they're having to work a bit harder this weekend, that's for sure. There really is a challenge here from Ferrari. It looks as though Hill is building up speed once again as he comes round the last corner, and this is another opportunity for him.
Well, he sensibly chose to abort that lap. It wasn't right. It didn't feel right. It was wrong, really, from the end of the straight. He knew that the car and balance of the car wasn't working the way he wanted. Let's watch what happens here. Now, that's much, much better. You can see he got the car into the corner. There was no run out of the front of the car. So the position of the car exiting that chicane to come into this very, very long and very fast exit, that long right-hand corner, then all the way down into third gear. And again, the acceleration, it's so important to be neat, clean and tidy. That's where the time comes from. But how you attain that, that's the key, and that's the difficult part of Formula One.
So Jean Alesi still fastest from Gerhard Berger, and Damon Hill third fastest. Hill on a charge to try and improve on that time. Johnny Herbert is fourth, and Eddie Irvine is fifth. Mika Hakkinen is currently sixth fastest, the early pace setter. We saw him out in the beginning of the session, but haven't seen him out since. David Coulthard is now out on the circuit. He's left it quite late, and we're a half an hour into the session before Coulthard decided to come out, but he is beginning to start his first qualifying run. He's completed. Oh, look at Hill! Completely crossed up there, and well, we haven't seen that too often with the Williams this year.
Well, that just shows the margin is so fine between being in control and having grip and having the back end just suddenly break away. Damon's knee must have come so far back in the cockpit that he got off the throttle to correct it. And of course, there 2 seconds, that lap slower than Jean Alesi, and probably at least half of it, maybe more of it, was down to that one moment of heart and mouth. And again, another lap ebbs away. Damon now on his 5th lap, and he's almost midway through those that are available to him.
The other man we haven't seen anything of yet is Michael Schumacher. The reigning world champion is taking his time to come out onto the circuit. He is, in fact, the last man to be coming out. We haven't seen any side of him yet, but we have had 25 cars on the circuit. So he really is being fairly cool about things at the moment. But I think with Alesi having set his time in just 3 laps, the same with Gerhard Berger, we've seen that Coulthard has now done a couple of laps and has moved himself up to 4th place, in fact, Coulthard. So he has suddenly entered into that top 6. Herbert has dropped down to 5th now, and Eddie Irvine is 6th. You can see the rest of the times on your screen, but we still have yet to see Schumacher.
Well, in fact, we've got very few cars on the track, but one of them is Michael Schumacher. After 33 minutes, 32.18 seconds, Schumacher is on the track, and he's chosen an ideal time because there are about 5 or 6 cars currently on the circuit. Everybody else who's completed their first runs are back in the pits waiting for everybody else to go out to get a very busy track and then to come in and say, I couldn't get a lap because there was too much traffic. Well, Benetton and Schumacher certainly have chosen the right time as we watch David Coulthard completing his 3rd lap. And will this be an improvement? We're going to see. It looks right now as if it will be. And this could see Coulthard up onto this first row of the grid. Well, he's just put Damon Hill back to 4th place. He's gone 3rd quickest, 2nd row of the grid.
0.04 of a second slower than Gerhard Berger was Coulthard on that lap. So it's all very close behind Alesi, but Alesi still with this 1.2 second advantage at the moment. It's a massive advantage. The next 3, Berger, Coulthard and Hill, are all covered by 1/10 of a second, and then we see another second back to Johnny Herbert and Eddie Irvine, who are just a couple of tenths apart. Nigel Mansell, well, he's 12th fastest at the moment. He's only done 1 run of 4 laps so far, finds himself 12th and just ahead at the moment of Martin Brundle, who is in 13th place. So Schumacher has completed his first lap, is now on to his first qualifying lap. Coulthard still pushing hard as well. 57.715, that's the split time from Jean Alesi. We haven't seen anybody get anywhere near it as yet. What can Coulthard do this time around? 58, well, you see, 3/4 of a second down at that second intermediary, and it doesn't look as though he's going to be able to improve.
Well, Coulthard completing, this is his 4th flying lap, and at the end of this lap I suspect he's going to feel, well, I've done the best I can on this set of tyres. He wants to keep some laps in reserve, but he's got to be careful because with so many people waiting in the pits, should he choose to go in at the end of this lap, when he comes back out he will be confronted with precisely the same problem that the rest are going to face, and that is a very busy circuit.
Michael Schumacher then. What can he do? The man who took pole position at the last race in Imola, the first pole position of the year for him. And, well, it's 1 apiece for him and Hill. They're so evenly matched in terms of statistics at the moment. They've both got 11 wins to their credit. They've both had 1 pole position so far this year. And the battle between the 2 of them for the championship this year really is wonderful. But, of course, the great thing is that it's not just those 2, as we're seeing now in this qualifying session, with a great challenge from Ferrari. Here we go then, on to a qualifying lap.
Well, Schumacher took his 2nd lap very, very cautiously. Indeed, he didn't try and go for a banzai lap. It was 1 minute 30.476. This is going to be Schumacher at his most committed in a Benetton Renault, which they believe is an improvement But judging from Michael Schumacher's comments this morning, he said the car isn't comfortable. It's very, very difficult over the bumps. He still dragged the time out of it, and they're 79 hundredths of a second slower than provisional pole man Jean Alesi, who must be sitting back in the pits thinking, well, I got a miracle lap in, the car was wonderful, I'm just going to sit back and see Michael Schumacher his time, because right now I would think that Alesi must look at Schumacher as being potentially, and there, one of the two McLarens, Nigel Mansell, but Alesi must consider that Schumacher, at this point, we're some 47 minutes into the session, 37 minutes into the session, the most dangerous to him. Almost 0.2 of a second down on Alesi and going slower.
Well, Schumacher nearer to Alesi than anybody else that we've seen so far in this session, but is it going to be enough? Certainly he's dragging the time out of the car. Once again, the car looking more twitchy. It was the same this morning. He had that spin down at the Elf chicane. We wait to see what happened there. That was Nigel Mansell's spin, but you see on the screen Schumacher's just gone second fastest, 0.4 of a second slower than Jean Alesi. Well, the McLaren not involved in any contact with anything, so Schumacher goes second fastest onto another lap to see whether he can find that missing half a second.
Again, at the end of the straight, that chicane, you see the car slide through there. It isn't tram landing. That's what we've seen the Ferrari do here throughout the morning and into this qualifying session. But again, well, this is an onboard shot. This is Nigel Mansell showing you, I believe, well, that's Mansell's car. That was from the cockpit, or from the wing of Michael Schumacher's car, as David Coulthard makes his way back into the pits, back at the action, back with Michael Schumacher. 57.7 is that segment time that he wants to see an improvement on. We look for a minus on Alesi. Now making down the new part of the circuit, this is the straight that was completed for this year's Grand Prix, 1.2 seconds. Michael Schumacher probably is either just going to forget about this lap, or he's going to come in, or the third option is take it easy and have another go on his next flying lap, which will be his fifth.
Jean Alesi is back out onto the circuit as well. He's ready for his second run. He's only completed 3 laps. There comes Schumacher into the pits. Not surprising that. So Schumacher, he's gone second fastest. Berger's third. Coulthard is fourth. Damon Hill is fifth. Johnny Herbert sixth. And Eddie Irvine is in 7th place. We'll be right back after this break on Eurosport. Welcome back to first qualifying from Barcelona. You're taking a look now at Mika Hakkinen in the McLaren Mercedes. He's 7th fastest. He's on his second session here, his second run, and you're looking there at the man who's currently 3rd fastest, Gerhard Berger. In the Ferrari, it's Jean Alesi, his teammate, who has the provisional pole during this session so far, but we've still got some 17.5 minutes to go in this session. Michael Schumacher 2nd, Berger 3rd, Coulthard is 4th, and Damon Hill 5th. So the two Williams Renaults finding themselves on the 2nd and 3rd provisional row at the moment.
Well, somehow or other, David Coulthard and Damon Hill are just going to have to find more grip from their Williams Renault, because that's really where they're losing out. Ferrari appears to have tons of it. Michael Schumacher has, I would say, heroed the Benetton Renault around to get into 2nd place. And all the way down in 6th, 7th and 8th, you've got Irvine, Hakkinen. Those two seem to be in love with one another because they're always together on the track, in qualifying, whatever. And Johnny Herbert up in 8th place. And Johnny, we're looking still in the pits, completed 6 laps, and hoping that when he gets back out, he can get himself back up into that top 6.
We're on board with Jean Alesi. You can see he's going fairly slowly again. He has just done a quick lap. It was 0.2 of a second slower than his previous best, and in fact is still the 2nd fastest time. His last lap, still the 2nd fastest of the session, but at the moment he holds provisional pole with a 23.129. Michael Schumacher 2nd fastest, Gerhard Berger 3rd, Coulthard, then Hill, Eddie Irvine, Hakkinen, Herbert and Mansell in 9th position. And Rubens Barrichello, well, he's only done 3 laps so far. He finds himself down in 10th. Ukio Katayama is the first of the Tyrrells. He's in 11th place. Panis is down to 12th. And Martin Brundle is in 14th place.
Well, Martin Brundle making his Grand Prix debut for this year. And in effect, what you see at Ligier is, if you think back 5 or 6 years, is really Jaguar. You've got Tom Walkinshaw, Martin Brundle, and Tony Dyer. And Tony Dyer was responsible for running the American end of the Jaguar team in the IMSA sports car racing. And what they're trying to do really is just understand that Ligier Honda. They've had all sorts of problems with it, not unrelated to those of Benetton. But this is the chassis, and these are the two drivers, Gerhard Berger here and Jean Alesi, who are setting the pace. Alesi holding that provisional pole by almost half a second from Michael Schumacher. Gerhard Berger a further half second behind Schumacher. And, well, the two Williams, Coulthard and Hill, still 4th and 5th. And we've got some 15 minutes remaining. It's going to be a action-packed 15 minutes.
Things are certainly being set up well here. It's interesting to note that after the free practice session this morning, both Gerhard Berger and Jean Alesi said officially that a lot of work needs to be done before they can get the best out of the Ferrari. And yet, here we are, we're seeing the times at the moment. Jean Alesi half a second up. Gerhard Berger is currently 3rd fastest, and now going on to a lap to see whether he can further improve. 23.638. In fact, he did improve on that last lap fractionally, but he remains in 3rd place.
And did Gerhard Berger ever look committed as he came on to the start-finish straight? That is a big effort. We're going to see a big effort if we get the chance, because we're now watching Jean Alesi very calmly, quietly talk to his engineers. But let's watch Berger, because this is going to be a monumental effort from the Austrian. He wants to be on the front row of the grid. He wants to be on pole position. But Ferrari is certainly providing the best car on the day so far for their two drivers. Only Michael Schumacher with his Benetton Renault managing to poke that nose in between the two red machines. And I think that was a big effort from Schumacher to get there.
Indeed it was. Well, Gerhard Berger qualified 2nd, remember, at the last race at Imola, just a few thousandths of a second behind Michael Schumacher. We've yet to see a pole position for Ferrari this year, but at the moment things are looking very promising. Alesi, remember, qualified down in 5th at Imola, was disappointed on that first day, wasn't able to improve on the second day like most people in the hotter weather conditions. And I think we've got to be wary of something similar here with a rather undecided, shall we say, weather forecast for the weekend. Everybody, I think, has to go for it today, because we just don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Well, there's no question, Ben, because the weather has been so changeable, and anybody who is not able or cannot get a time today is going to be sitting on eggs, because they don't know what Saturday's weather is going to bring. One thing is for sure, Alesi and Berger are probably pretty happy.
Welcome back to first qualifying from Barcelona. We were just taking a look at Mika Salo, but the man on pole position at the moment is Jean Alesi. Alesi fastest from Michael Schumacher in 2nd. Then it's Gerhard Berger 3rd. David Coulthard is 4th. Damon Hill 5th. And Eddie Irvine is now in 6th position, just ahead of Mika Hakkinen, Johnny Herbert. Nigel Mansell is 9th, and Rubens Barrichello in 10th.
Well, in fact, that top 10, in fact, Barrichello has only completed 3 laps, and he has stopped somewhere. He has not been on the track for some time. The top 9, all in the pits. In fact, Katayama and Panis equally in the pits. Inoue should be coming into the pits to finish his 12 laps. Frentzen in 14th place. He's in the pits. Martin Brundle has gone out after 21 minutes in the pits, and this has got to be the time before this last mad dash. 10 minutes remaining. If somebody wants to go out and get a clear track and find an improvement, they ought to be doing it now. If they wait more than 2 or 3 minutes, in my view, it's going to be too late. Traffic is just going to be chaotic. Well, Johnny Herbert quietly in his car waiting for those alterations to be carried out. And Johnny Herbert on the 4th row of the grid, 8th quickest. So, Martini, he's gone out. Bertrand Gachot also out onto the circuit. And Martini all the way down in 21st place. Bertrand Gachot all the way down in 24th. And that is problems for those at the front, because if they choose to go out, then they've got the problem of passing the slower cars, who are going to be doing their best. And remember, they're trying to improve their qualifying times as well.
just over 9 minutes remaining, and it really is, it's setting itself up for a classic end to this qualifying session. Still only 3 cars on the circuit at the moment. Everyone else seems to be in the pits. Well, 1 or 2 more have just gone out, as John was saying, but it does mean that it is going to be very, very busy in a few minutes' time. Jean Alesi with almost half a second advantage over Michael Schumacher, but Schumacher has only done 4 laps out of his allowed 12. Gerhard Berger has done 7 laps in his 3rd place. Then David Coulthard and the man we're looking at now, Damon Hill. They're currently 4th and 5th. The difference between them, very, very little. It's only around, well, it's exactly a 1/10 of a second. It will take a thousandth. So nothing between the two Williams boys, but they find themselves down in 4th and 5th places. They'll be disappointed with that at the moment. They've had a pole apiece this year, and they will not be happy to find themselves down there. We're looking now at Pierluigi Martini. He is 21st at the moment, just a fraction faster than his teammate Luca Badoer.
And Pierluigi Martini made himself pretty unpopular in Imola by not giving way to leading cars. And his reply was, okay guys, you drive my car, I'll drive yours, and we'll see what the situations are like in reverse. Nonetheless, when the lead cars come up to lap you, it is your responsibility. You don't have to throw an anchor out and stop, but at least make way, and inevitably you don't lose very much time. And particularly if you're running on your own, as Martini at quite a lot of the parts of the lap was doing, it wouldn't have been a big problem for him. One might call it bloody-mindedness, whatever it was, it certainly caught the attentions and upset a lot of people. As we see on the back of a flatbed truck, Rubens Barrichello's Jordan being brought back into the pits. So Barrichello had only completed 3 laps. He's still in the 5th row of the grid in 10th place, but further disappointment to this young Brazilian in a year really which has not gone his way at all.
Heinz-Harald Frentzen has just come out onto the circuit as well. He'll be disappointed to see himself down in 14th place at the moment after a much faster session this morning for him, so he'll have to see if he can improve. And we're still waiting for the top men to come out again. It really is hotting up. We've only got 7 minutes remaining in this session. Schumacher and Alesi both due to come out once more. Out onto the circuit comes one of the Williams Renaults, and it's that of David Coulthard. So Coulthard currently 4th fastest. Can he improve? He's on a new set of tyres, the sticker tyres. We've just had news in the commentary box that Jos Verstappen, who's currently 17th fastest, has had a gearbox failure, so he's not able to go out and improve anymore on his lap time. So 17th at the moment and in danger of dropping further back.
Well, very disappointing mechanical failure for Verstappen. He did a great job throughout the morning session. He ended up at one stage at back being quickest, and ended up being 12th. And what he is bringing to Simtek, and a team really that, like many teams further down the scale in Formula One, always this battle for finance, always looking for more money to give them more equipment, to be able to use fresher equipment, to do more testing. And it's one of those catch-22 situations, so difficult for a new team to establish itself and then to make progress. Verstappen, certainly an asset to the Simtek 4 team at this point of the season.
Still watching David Coulthard, but just to report that Michael Schumacher has just left the pits as well. So here they start to come. All of the quick runners now beginning to come out onto the circuit, but Coulthard was the first of them. So he's on a setting up lap at the moment, and he's about to start a flying lap.
And really this is a nail-biting moment for both drivers and teams, because they sat in their garages, they waited. I think some of them waited much too long. We've only got 5 minutes remaining. We have to see whether I can be proved wrong. But with Coulthard out, Schumacher, Herbert, Irvine, we're waiting to see what's going to happen. Jean Alesi also is sitting in the pits. Berger in the pits. Damon Hill in the pits. How long are they going to wait?
Coulthard, a big improvement on that section time, because he's only a little way off Jean Alesi's section time, and that's certainly a good performance. So we stay with him for the remainder of this lap to see just what the young Scot can do. Returning to Barcelona, the venue of his Grand Prix debut last year, and now really building the confidence as he goes through this year. Disappointing race for him really in Imola with that spin. And then the penalty as well. Oh, well, he's only 1/10 of a second behind there as well. So certainly Schumacher's 2nd place is under threat. And perhaps Alesi's provisional pole at the moment also under threat.
But the problem for Coulthard is that car ahead of him Is it going to come into play, or is it sufficiently far ahead? Remember, the camera on the car gives a slightly false perspective of the closeness, and again, the effect of aerodynamics, the loss of aerodynamics. Coulthard is second quickest, 1 minute 23.496, just over 0.3 of a second slower. And there's the man, Eddie Irvine. And Coulthard will not want to get involved with Irvine, because Irvine's doing his own thing. He's not going to give ground. Sensibly. Well done, Coulthard. You realise that this lap, you're going to have to make a sacrifice. You've still got time left. A lap left, a lap extra on the tyres. By going slowly, you may lose a little bit of tyre temperature. Hopefully the pressures will remain constant. But to attempt to struggle past Irvine or get embroiled in a battle in a qualifying session would have been a mistake. Let Irvine do his thing, wait till you come on to start, finish straight, and have another go.
Nigel Mansell is also out on the circuit again. He's currently 11th fastest. Mika Hakkinen is 7th fastest, just ahead of Johnny Herbert. Herbert's out there as well in an attempt to improve on his time. But Coulthard, the new second fastest man. Any changes as they cross the line? Schumacher 23.535. That is an improvement, but he still remains in third place.
Well, Schumacher's first flying lap was half a second slower than he achieved on his first run. And again, look at the commitment from Schumacher. This is the man who really has battled all year with a slightly wayward car, and already just over 0.1 of a second down on Alesi. But is that sufficient to put him into second place and back onto the provisional front row of the grid? We will not know until we get that second segment time, because that's going to be the real indicator to whether Schumacher has maintained that gap, whether he's narrowed it or has it just evaporated and drifted away.
We have just over 2 minutes to go. Damon Hill is also out on the circuit, so it's going to be hard to follow all of these cars as they try to improve their time. But Schumacher, what is he, 0.3 of a second down on the split time? It doesn't look as though he's going to be able to improve on Coulthard's time. Schumacher currently third, and I don't think he's going to be able to make it any better this time.
No, you could see the car exiting out of the left hand, up the axle, the back end breaking away. The car is not balanced. Schumacher is having to horse the car around. Now here's the man on pole position, Jean Alesi. 1:23.129 was the time he said early in the session. Is this an improvement? 1:23.104. He has gone quicker by 25 hundredths of a second. Gerhard Berger now joins him on the front row of the grid. Berger 1:23.458, 3.5 of a second. Oh, and a spin. And is that Schumacher or is it Herbert? It is Michael Schumacher. The battle between man and machine was won by the machine.
Somewhat ironic that he just passed Jean Alesi as they came down to the first corner. Alesi moving out of his way has slowed down. Schumacher went flying past. The next moment he's spinning. Johnny Herbert has moved up to 5th position, but no, it's down to 6th because Mika Hakkinen has just gone 5th fastest. It's all changing, and what may you ask of Damon Hill? He's only 7th at the moment as we wait for him to cross the line. Jean Alesi, though, provisional pole at the moment. It's looking good for him.
And not only that, behind Johnny Herbert in 6th, we got Damon 7th. Damon Hill 7th. I can't believe it. The leader of the World Championship. Irvine back in 8th. Frentzen up to 9th. Panis is 10th. Nigel Mansell all the way down in 12th place. Great disappointment for Mansell. Big disappointment for McLaren Mercedes-Benz. Arachello, of course, he's only completed 3 laps. His car stopped very early in the session. He's now falling further down the grid. So, Jean Alesi 1:23.104, Berger 1:23.458.
And Damon Hill has just crossed the line with 4 seconds before the checkered flag came out. He has got a chance to improve his time, but my word, he left that to the last moment.
Well, I thought Ben Edwards was going to leap through the roof of our commentary booth. He was so excited, and 4 seconds is cutting it fine. But Damon Hill has one last opportunity to raise himself from 7th place up to pole position, front row of the grid, second row of the grid. He's on the 3rd row. In fact, he's on the 4th row. So can Damon Hill snatch a good lap on this closing
lap. Gerhard Berger also crossed the line with around 17 seconds to go, and I thought that would be the last car across the line. But Berger also on a potentially quick lap, but we're on board with Damon Hill. This is his last opportunity to move himself up from 7th on the grid, and he's got to get round a clean, clear lap without making a mistake to get him somewhere up amongst the top 3 or 4.
Well, at this point, and this is almost the end of the lap, the car looked good, Damon looks good. It's now these final 2 right-hand corners, both this first downhill. This is the last corner on the start-finish straight. He's got to beat a 1:23, 1:04, 1:24, 3:56. He's up onto the 3rd row of the grid, ahead of Mika Hakkinen in 5th place, but he will be disappointed.
Damon Hill then, 5th fastest, but it's Jean Alesi with the pole position, the provisional pole position, as we look forward to a second qualifying session on Saturday. But what a great performance from Alesi. He's fastest, Gerhard Berger 2nd fastest, David Coulthard 3rd, then Michael Schumacher, Damon Hill. We're just taking a quick look back at that spin for Schumacher. Nothing too dramatic there, but certainly it may have cost him the opportunity of improving on that 4th position that he has. So it's Schumacher and Hill 4th and 5th. I think they'll both be disappointed with that. And then in 6th place, Mika Hakkinen. Johnny Herbert 7th, then Erdi Irvine in 8th place, Heinz-Harald Frentzen 9th, Olivier Panis in 10th, with Mansell in 12th, and Martin Brundle down in 15th.
But what a great end to this first qualifying session. The 2 Ferraris on the front row of the grid. Coulthard 3rd, Schumacher 4th, Hill 5th. Those 5 are going to battle, and I hope they're given the opportunity on Saturday afternoon. I hope we don't see this changeable weather that we've had over the previous day or so here in Barcelona, because that's going to be a battle, an almighty battle on Saturday afternoon. But how good, it's wonderful. It's a feel-good factor having those 2 Ferraris on that front row of the grid. And I have to say, I wouldn't be disappointed if at the end of the day Saturday was wet. What it would do for Formula One to see Alesi on pole, Berger alongside him, start this Spanish Grand Prix. It's got to bring in more, hundreds of thousands of viewers.
Well, there you can see the top 10 on the list, and let's look down the rest of the top 20. Yukio Katayama 11th, then Mansell, Barrichello after that problem 13th, Mikasalo 14th, then Brundle, Inouye out-qualifying his teammate Morbidelli. Now there's a surprise. Verstappen with the gearbox problems 18th, then Martini, Wendlinger disappointing down in 20th place, with Frentzen in 9th position. So again, a little disappointing for the Austrian. And then the final few qualifiers, Schiattarella from Luca Badoa, then Andrea Montermini ahead of Bertrand Gachot, his teammate for Pacific. And then once again, it's the 2 40 Fords at the back of the grid, with Diniz just ahead of Moreno. So we've, at the moment, got a repeat of the front row from Monza last year. Jean Alesi on provisional pole with Gerhard Berger alongside him. That was how they lined up to start the race at Monza last year. But of course, another qualifying session to go before it's all decided. So it's been a very exciting qualifying session. David Coulthard is 3rd, Schumacher 4th, with Damon Hill 5th. It certainly sets things up well for Saturday's qualifying, and you'll be able to join John Watson and Ben Edwards live for it on Eurosport.